Just because this is the longest video I've ever done doesn't mean it's going to be the least fun. Even though it probably will be. Hello, one and all, and welcome back to Storytime. I hope you're as excited as I am to finally talk about Avengers Infinity War, one of the most shocking, emotionally devastating movies ever made. A landmark of the superhero genre and American cinema as a whole, a touchstone of a generation. Just kidding, this pile of crap is far and away the worst movie of 2018 and sits comfortably in the bottom of the 21st century cinematic excrement bucket. This movie is so bad it makes Adam Sandler blush. At least he has fun making his movies. Its inept script is forced to try and reckon with a decade of amateur storytelling, producing, for all its effort, an undercooked steaming lump of lazy emotional manipulation demanding at the top of its lungs that we take it seriously. They even put end credits in serif font and used brooding piano music. What more can one movie do? If you learn nothing else in this video, learn this now. This movie is an atrocity, for reasons ranging from its terrible storytelling to its highly unsubtle attempts to take Holocaust equivocating into the mainstream. It's bad, only bad, and nothing but bad, and I'm going to spend my time here doling out metaphorical corporal punishment for its terribleness. I'm going to be spoiling stuff too, I guess. Everyone dies. As always, if you'd rather hear how much of a masterpiece this movie is...
Get out.
Avengers Infinity War is a 2018 film directed by our old pals, the Russo brothers. You'll remember them as the guys who made violent neo-fascism cool again with Captain America the Worser Soldier and Captain America Civil Worst. I'm not saying they personally subscribe to that kind of thinking or advocate for it, only that they are either too dumb to realize what they are putting out into the world, or that they don't care. But, turns out the fascist fetishizing of those movies was just a warm-up. Just wait till you see what they've cooked up this time around. The, screenplay was charted out by these guys, who you'll remember also charted out screenplays for this crap too, all of which they worked very hard on and none of which are problematic in any way. The story depicts the long-awaited arrival of Thanos, a big purple space thumb finally ready to unleash his master plan for fixing the universe, killing half the population on every planet to restore proper balance or something. Don't worry, the film definitely doesn't realize it's dabbling in the language of genocide and ethnic cleansing in order to make a crappy cartoon villain, but it does try to make him a sympathetic, even tragic anti-hero we can feel more than a little bad for. He's a complicated man with a lot on his mind. Way to go, Disney, batting 1,000 on this one.
You think of the children!
In order to combat the unprecedented threat of the purple space thumb, the vigilantes and war criminals formerly known as the Avengers, plus the Guardians of the Galaxy and citizens of Wakanda, must band together to fight a pitched land battle on Earth, when the space thumb shows up to gather the last of his magic rocks.
We have the magic rocks. They will keep us safe.
Which, of course, we knew all about, the other movies in the series having definitely explained to us what they are and what they do and why they are important and why so many movies in the series have used them as MacGuffins.
Why have we not heard of these rocks before?
I hate everything in this movie. The movie has every character in it, so we're just gonna spotlight the ones who do things, which is almost no one. Thanos. Here he is, folks! After 6 agonizing years of teasing, we finally get a real look at Thanos, our ultimate bad guy. He is a purple space thumb, or Titan, formerly of a planet also called Titan, and he has been spending an unspecified amount of time traveling from planet to planet, unbeknownst to the Asgardian Colonial Space Police, of course, in order to kill half the people on those planets, because he feels the universe is out of balance for some reason. He has dedicated his whole life to this idea for reasons we definitely learn about and that make sense, since this is a real movie telling a real story written by competent professionals. Everyone else. Every other character is basically just a tool for the plot, which mostly orbits around Thanos. Here are some of their notable activities. Tony Stark stows away on a space donut to help Doctor Strange. Peter Parker stows away on a space donut to help Tony help Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange gets kidnapped on a space donut because he has the green rock. Bruce Banner gets Rainbow Roaded to Earth and warns the Avengers about Thanos. and for some reason can't Hulk anymore. Guess he was wrong about being Perma-Hulk in the last movie. Oh well. Hopefully he can find like some Hulk Cialis or something.
There's gotta be a better way to say that.
Thor swears to avenge Thanos for killing all the Asgardians, so he makes a new magical hammer axe. Steve Rogers comes out of hiding with his trusty sidekicks Natasha and Sam to be morally superior to everyone and tell them what to do and kick-punch bad guys and stuff. Vision goes to Wakanda to get the yellow rock removed from out of his head to destroy it. Wanda goes with him because of love. The Guardians of the Galaxy find Thor floating in space and split up to either go with him to make a new magical hammer or try to find the red rock before Thanos gets to it. Gamora gets captured by Thanos, then gets brutally murdered by the plot because of love.
I wanna know what love is.
Marvelous women! The Wakandans all have to fight because Steve brings them an apocalyptic MacGuffin without their consent. In general, there's a lot of punching and jumping and running around and kicking and shooting by all. Now, to be fair, the movie does a good job juggling its dozens and dozens of characters. It always feels like people have something to do, and the movie keeps up a brisk pace. It always feels urgent, and the steady rate at which Thanos acquires new magic rocks contributes to this urgency, which is great. Structurally, it is built around Thanos, essentially pretending he is the protagonist, and this is, I think, another right choice. That's 2.
Congratulations!
His actions are driving what little plot we have, and he is even successful at the end, like protagonists usually are. Helps drive home the failure of our heroes. Hope you like that, because that's all I will be saying in praise of this movie. Everything else that the story is made of, including the characters, their actions, and whatever crap we might generously call the movie's themes, is terrible. There's too much to cover in a single video, so here's what I'll be focusing on. Our heroes are terrible heroes who fail for the dumbest possible reasons. Thanos has a terrible plan that makes no sense. The movie puts the consequences of a decade of terrible storytelling on full glorious display. The movie treats women even more terribly than normal. The movie's themes are beyond terrible. Here we go, I guess. Next stop, fun.
Looking out the window, that's a paddling.
Who better to kick off this cavalcade of crap than the heroes we've spent a decade getting to know and love? In a certain sense, Infinity War is a movie about failure. After countless adventures where our heroes ultimately come off victorious, defeating the bad guy against all odds by punching him or her into submission, Infinity War ends with Thanos accomplishing his goal of gathering all the magic rocks and killing half the universe, including all of our non-original heroes except the raccoon. Thanos also gets away, leaving everyone with a palpable sense of, that's not how this is supposed to go.
I lost. Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to lose. Let me see the script.
It would be a really powerful moment in a real movie, but since it's a Marvel movie and no one was trying, the overwhelming feeling one gets is, thank goodness this movie is finally over, because everything our heroes do is insufferably dumb. In a real movie, Thanos would win by outsmarting, outmaneuvering, or outfighting the good guys. Notwithstanding their best efforts, he would just be too much for them, with ever more momentum in his favor as he collects more magic rocks. By the end, it's a desperate fight they just can't handle, and even though they give it their all, they fail. Infinity War, however, is not a real movie. It's a pretend movie written and produced by hacks so focused on pandering to and shocking their audience they forgot to actually tell a story. Thanos does not win by being smart or strategic or strong. He wins because our heroes are petty, selfish, and immature, which, from his perspective, is no different than winning by luck, which is dumb. To illustrate, let's review how Thanos obtains the 6 magic rocks and is otherwise aided and abetted by the Avengers' dumbness. Thanos gets the purple rock off screen before the movie starts, evidently by destroying the planet Xandar where it was held. While undoubtedly a lazy storytelling move, the outcome feels plausible since we've seen the Xandar fighting force before, which was overcome by Ronan in Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Verdict? Not the Avengers' fault. Thanos gets the blue rock after destroying the Asgardians' non-warship with his far superior weapons in a surprise attack. Loki, who stole the blue rock from Asgard in Thor 3 for some reason, gives it to Thanos in an attempt to trick him. This backfires, resulting in Loki's highly tragic death that was definitely permanent and lasting. Verdict? Not the Avengers' fault, but it is Loki's fault, who is basically an honorary Avenger at this point. Thanos gets the red rock by going to nowhere and basically destroying it unopposed. Verdict? Not the Avengers' fault. They do technically try to stop him, but are too late to actually have any impact. Okay, I know it seems like so far Thanos is winning because he's smart and stuff, but here's where things start to get dumb. Thanos hangs around nowhere in order to capture Gamora because he needs her to get the orange rock. The only reason he is able to capture her basically comes down to the fact that Peter does not take her seriously enough to believe her about the stakes of the situation, even though he knows her past with Thanos and has personally experienced the kind of power a single magic rock has. Before they arrive, Gamora makes Peter swear to kill her if it looks like Thanos will capture her. Like, serious stuff here. To his credit, Peter does, eventually, make the attempt after much hemming, hawing, and self-pitying so that Thanos can have plenty of time to alter reality with his newly acquired reality stone so that Peter's weapon fails. In other words, if Peter had done as he'd promised, as terrible as that is, and killed Gamora as she was being captured, Thanos would be unable to determine the whereabouts of the orange rock. Possibly ever, but at least for a while, buying the good guys crucial time to mount a defense. And even if he did find the orange rock eventually, Thanos would be unable to acquire it since that which he loves is already lost. While Thanos does set a trap for the Guardians using the red rock, it is only successful because Peter is a dickhead who doesn't take things that girls say seriously.
Don't ask me. I'm just a girl.
She sure is.
We're supposed to feel bad for him for this. I hate everything in this movie. Verdict? Definitely Peter's fault, with an assist from Drax for jumping the gun, even though it was a trap, so I guess technically that doesn't matter. Peter's fault. Oh yeah, gross side note, after Gamora is taken by Thanos, Peter refers to her as his long-term booty call, and blames her for getting captured because she didn't follow his directions. Boyfriend of the year, such a great role model for the kids. Thanks, Disney.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Thanos gets the orange rock because he captures Gamora, which, as we've discussed, is Peter's fault. But also, Gamora is only captured because she accompanies Peter to nowhere in the first place, knowing that if she is caught by the massively powerful Titan they are trying to outfox, he will eventually force her to take him to the orange rock. So, rather than, say, go with Thor to the Forge, or to literally anywhere else in the galaxy where Thanos isn't, she goes with Peter to where Thanos is. She makes this choice not because it is the most reasonable, or for a character-based reason like being consumed by a lust for revenge or something. She does this because the plot needs her to so it can kill her, because Marvel respects its female characters by giving them plenty of agency all the time.
Thinking too much gives you wrinkles.
Verdict? The writer's fault, via Gamora for making her act dumb. Before he acquires the final two stones, Thanos is not stripped of the gauntlet on Titan for the one single reason that Peter Quill is once again a petty a-hole, choosing to punch Thanos because he learns Gamora, his beloved long-term booty call, is dead. It's not even him collapsing in despair, allowing Thanos to break free or something. It's just adolescent rage born of the aggression of one who has a favorite possession taken away. Even if he had just channeled his rage into, say, not waking Thanos up from the magic sleep Mantis was holding him in and just helping get the gauntlet off, no one else would have died, and he could have brutally murdered Thanos for revenge at his leisure. All he had to do for the good guys to be successful in stripping the gauntlet away was nothing, and his immature rage in a moment when the fate of the universe is at stake makes him fail. This ultimately results in Thanos acquiring the green rock. Verdict? Definitely Peter's fault again. Thanos gets the yellow rock for the single reason that Wanda and Steve Rogers won't let a robot butler they built on accident sacrifice itself for the good of all life, including them. Wanda, we are told, at least has feelings for Vision, so we theoretically get why she's not on board. But with Steve, it mostly comes off as him not liking things that aren't his idea, as always, even though it is the most reasonable thing to do and the price of failure is impossibly high. Their attempt to remove the stone from Vision's head is reasonable, but they wait far too long to abort the plan. Verdict? Wanda and Steve's fault. So, Thanos is triumphant in acquiring the magic rocks, not because he outsmarted our heroes at every turn, or because he used the magic rocks in clever ways to fight our heroes, or was able to deceive our heroes, or anything. He wins because our heroes make petty personal choices for selfish reasons at critical moments, despite knowing the colossal stakes of the situation. And yet we are supposed to feel sad for these people, who are of course the true victims. But you're saying Peter Quill and Steve Rogers aren't all the Avengers. The other ones did everything they could. It's that thing of the Avengers as imperfect people coming together to fight for goodness or whatever. I hear you, I understand you, but you're wrong. For in addition to their stupid, petty personal issues, our heroes feel like the worst possible defense to Thanos' threat. On the one hand, they do have very little warning that he is coming to Earth. But on the other hand, they've had 6 years of warning that something was coming. It's been 6 years since the Ataris attacked New York. The one thing MCU has been consistent about is the event's impact on Tony Stark. Since that battle, he's been really concerned about defending the planet. To that end, he made Ultron, and agreed to basically subsume the Avengers into the UN to serve the best interests of the global community. Trouble is, he's the only one who seems to care. Steve, of course, can't abide anyone ever telling him what to do, because preserving his personal individual freedom, even at the cost of everyone else's lives, is his only directive, so he's not going to be any help in preparing for a potential global invasion. Thor was trying to find out more about the magic rocks until he just decided not to anymore.
Work was hard, so we quit.
Doctor Strange doesn't appear to have laid any groundwork for this kind of event, even in the wake of whatever that thing was that he fought before, who also had universe-ending plans. And all the other heroes are basically sidekicks or low-level enforcers who don't get to have their own thoughts or stories. Neither have the governments of the world done anything, apparently. Since it's a Russo brothers film, the government is embodied solely in the person of Secretary Ross, and is therefore portrayed as an overreaching bureaucratic weenie concerned more with controlling those pesky Avengers than, leading people or whatever. Except even then I'm giving the movie too much credit. We don't actually see that no one has done anything. More accurately, the movie just forgets that there are people who aren't Avengers on planet Earth, and so nothing happens that they don't do themselves. So, when a space donut appears in New York City, we're forced to ask, why doesn't anyone, do anything? No fighter jets, no government situation room, no Tony trying to get in touch with the Pentagon or the UN or whatever and learning they've activated their alien invasion contingency plan, which they'd spent all that time preparing. Nope, just kick punching in the street. And it's worse in Wakanda, when another space donut hovering in the upper atmosphere sends down a bunch of invasion landing craft. I mean, I get that it might take a while to scramble fighter jets and stuff, but do long-range missiles not exist in this world? Did the Avengers not think to tell anyone what the threat actually was? Did they think Thanos would just come alone? Why is the solution to have a ground battle? Doesn't Wakanda have planes? All we need is just the quickest of explanations. Oh no, the alien space armor makes their landing craft totally impervious to ballistic Earth missiles. Their advanced space technology is jamming our weapon systems. We can't do anything. Our secret advanced prototype space protection weapon isn't ready to fire yet. Anything. Heck, maybe the governments of the world really are so dysfunctional that they can't come together in an emergency so that they really do nothing. And we see that that's the case so that something thematic can come out of it, even if it's dumb. Instead, we get a movie where apparently the only defense the world has against a long-feared massive space invasion is Wakanda's standing army of laser spears, a rogue soldier who doesn't use guns, a handful of other mercenaries, and a couple of guys in flying robot suits.
Staring at my handles. That's a peddling.
Don't worry, since Thanos is written by the same brilliant creative minds who wrote the other characters in the movie, he's dumb as a post also. We're going to set aside the nasty equivocation stuff for now and just talk about Thanos' plan. Specifically, that it makes no sense whatsoever and provides nothing to the movie on a story level, meaning it's not worth its own weight. Which is stupid. In short, as we all know, Thanos wants to bring balance to the universe, which he sees as being out of balance as a result of overpopulation. He proposes to achieve this balance by eliminating half of all, life. Okay. At least it's specific, kinda. He's almost got the S in his SMART goal worksheet figured out. But specific as it is, there are a few questions that arise out of this plan that neither Thanos nor the movie think to answer, or even ask, because they aren't aware of them, because this is a movie made by lazy hacks. Here are some of those questions. What does Thanos mean by life? After he snaps his fingers, we see people disappearing, and nothing else. So does he just mean intelligent life, specifically what we might call people? But how does he define that, especially across a galaxy with thousands of planets and many trillions of forms of life? Even on Earth, it's not necessarily that clear-cut. Many animals that aren't humans are arguably intelligent. They communicate and live in societies. Some use tools. Some have what we might term culture groups. Many have large brains. Some that don't still generate advanced neural networks. Even plants can communicate and alter their behavior when presented with stimuli. But on Earth, only human beings, and Groot, are affected by the snap. And on the flashback on Gamora's planet, seems like Thanos focuses just on those people too. So, again, how does Thanos define who and what he is eliminating? Does he have a catalog of all life in the universe and has decided which are advanced enough to be impacted and which will be left alone, since the snap clearly does not impact all species? Or is it somehow up to the discretion of the magic rocks? If so, what are their guidelines? How did Thanos go about it before he started collecting the magic rocks? Moving on. What evidence does Thanos have of universal imbalance? His justification seems to primarily come from his personal experience on his home planet, which was apparently so overpopulated that the planet's axis and gravitational field were drastically affected. Somehow?
We are dealing with science here.
Does he truly believe that every planet everywhere is as catastrophically overpopulated as his? What is his definition of overpopulation? Say a planet is overpopulated. What impact does that have on other planets, or the galaxy at large, anyway? Like, unless there's a crippling refugee situation, why would it matter to one planet if another had too much life on it? And there's not a single planet in the entire universe that has a balanced population and ecosystem? Or perhaps too little life? What justifies Thanos' conclusion that suddenly eliminating half of life, or people, or whatever, would bring about balance and not further upset the equilibrium? Surely a change so drastic in an ecosystem might have, adverse or unexpected consequences, right? How, if at all, does he account for those? For that matter, how does he even define balance? What passes as balance in one ecosystem might be seriously problematic in another? Finally, why does Thanos care about this at all? I understand being upset and traumatized by what happened on his own planet, but since that had nothing to do with any other planets, it seems like a monumental cognitive leap to then feel the kind of motivation he does to destroy half of all life everywhere. Another way to pose this question is, what will actually happen if Thanos fails to execute his plan? Or what will he gain by completing it? In other words, what does he have at stake?
Steak?
Money's too tight for steak.
And the answer is nothing.
Steak?
Sure, steak.
His home planet is already destroyed, and he had to kill the one thing he apparently loved to get his orange rock, so he can't say he's saving anything important to him.
I wanna know what love is.
If Thanos fails in his plan, the biggest consequence will be a sense of personal disappointment in not achieving a goal, and the lingering belief that all life everywhere will apparently end at some point, which, since as far as we know he made it up himself, is not a belief but a delusion. The movie tries to half-heartedly convince us that he just values all life for its own sake. That it is a choice between saving half and losing all. But I don't buy it. Besides, it gives us no reason to believe that horrible logic anyway. I don't want this to feel like a petty internet nitpick. I bring it up because Thanos' plan withstands no interrogation whatsoever, and therefore sacrifices what little credibility the story has. It's just another plot of another madman. Most of the evil schemes of MCU villains are rooted in insanity, but they also at least pass some tests of logic and applicability. These villains have something practical to achieve or lose, or are trying to perversely correct some injustice they've experienced, or have some sort of other real motive. Thanos' plan is special in that it is so insane the movie attempts no justification of it at all, which, from a story perspective, is unspeakably lazy. Distilled to its essence, Thanos' plan is this. He wants to destroy half of all life, whatever that means, in order to restore balance to the universe, whatever that means, because he views it as out of balance for some reason. And if he fails to do this, nothing will actually happen or change.
That doesn't make any sense.
This is the big master plan you've been teasing for 6 years? This is your big, terrifying arch-villain scheme, the greatest threat our heroes have ever had to face? Come on, guys, this is storytelling of a catastrophically lazy degree. Not only did the writers and producers not come up with a coherent plan for their series' big ultimate bad guy, they neglected to form coherent motives and parameters for it, and give it any kind of stakes.
What?
Hard work made us quit.
I see.
This means that, for all intents and purposes, at a story level, Thanos is no more than a bad villain of the week. The movie tricks us into thinking he's important because he is very powerful and is using the magic rocks, which will be destructive for our heroes. But at the end of the day, we don't know anything meaningful about him, or the rocks, or his plan, or why he is so motivated in the first place, which means that the story gives us no reason to care about anything that happens as a result. Just assumes we will because we've been guzzling the Marvel Kool-Aid for a decade now and have decided that we care, for basically the reasons Thanos cares, which is to say, for no reason at all. I mean, talking about a sinister plot.
Paddling the school canoe? Oh, you better believe that's a paddling.
Okay, so our heroes are selfish idiots and our villain is an insane one. That doesn't mean the story can't be good, right? I mean, technically, I'm of the belief any story can be good, no matter how outlandish, improbable, or generically boring its elements are. It all comes down to your basics, how well you are executing on essential storytelling components. There's a universe where Avengers Infinity War is still a coherent, entertaining movie, even if everyone in it sucks. It's possible to write that. That's unfortunately not the universe we live in, though. There are plenty of story issues to be found in Infinity War. They aren't all that hard to spot. All you have to be is alive, awake, and able to understand human language to find them. For time's sake, I'm going to point out just one that's related to what we've been talking about, and which casts a large shadow. Marvel's perpetually terrible characterization finally biting them in the butt. Perhaps Marvel's greatest contribution to cinema has been how far it has pushed the limits to which a protagonist can exist without receiving any meaningful characterization. You know, the things that make a character feel human. Their traits beyond just what they look like and what they do. Most storytellers feel that not characterizing your characters is a fatal proposition, but turns out you can pretty much get away with it indefinitely so long as nothing significant ever happens. Peter Parker can continue being whatever it is that he is forever, so long as his status quo isn't interrupted. Actually, this makes a kind of sense. It's the easiest, laziest way to serialize a story. Just create characters with broad strokes, give them one or two basic traits, and put them in various situations where they do things that don't fundamentally change forever. Easy. Works great. Until you have an Infinity War, that is. In a movie like this, where stuff does happen, for now, and there are stakes and consequences, for now, having characters with no discernible characterization means that nothing actually has any weight at all. Which is a problem. Here are some examples. Remember how I kept going on about how we should have been spending the Guardians of the Galaxy movies building up Gamora's and Thanos' relationship instead of dicking around with Peter and the space pirates? So that her being sacrificed in this movie would actually mean something to Gamora, Thanos, and us. Instead we get 2.5 minutes of hasty flashback exposition about how he kidnapped her. Then the movie asks us to believe that Thanos does actually in his heart of hearts love her for no reason that we can see or are ever shown.
I wanna know what love is.
And she is also apparently conflicted about him for some reason? What? It feels like we skipped a couple chapters, doesn't it? I hate everything in this movie. Remember how WandaVision is so important to these movies that I completely forgot they existed when I was cataloging all of our heroes? Twice?
Twice. 2 times.
That means they have nothing memorable about them, which means that their relationship hasn't been explored at all, which means we have no reason to care about it, which makes Wanda's reaction to Vision saying he needs to be sacrificed to save the universe just feel selfish. Oops, skip those chapters too. Remember how we don't really know anything about anyone who dies at the end, and because of that we don't actually feel anything? It's supposed to be this shocking, devastating event, but think about it. What about any of the characters who died are you really attached to? What do you know about them as people? Why do you relate to and empathize with them? Here's what we got. Bucky is hot and used to be brainwashed. Drax is funny and angry sometimes. Sam has wings. Groot is funny and cute. Mantis is kind of weird and funny. Peter Parker is a spider boy who makes Tony feel old. Peter Quill is a selfish a-hole we think is funny since it's Chris Pratt, who we like because of a real character he used to play on TV. Doctor Strange is also a selfish a-hole, but he's also a wizard. Same goes for Gamora, who doesn't know what dancing is and fights. The best we can do is characters like T'Challa, who we probably dig for his calm, regal demeanor, and is the leader of the coolest place in MCU, and Wanda, who would be really complex and interesting if any of the movies cared about her at all.
Don't ask me. I'm just a girl.
Marvel loves women. None of these characters have anything deep or personal going on. Connections like romance that we are invested in, or unresolved storylines that we are invested in, or unaccomplished desires that we are invested in, or anything at all that we are invested in. These are characters that we like because we have just decided to. Probably because they are generally kind of funny or do occasional cool things like shoot guys or punch guys or blow up guys. None of these characters leave a hole that can't be filled by some other quippy, quirky sidekick down the road, in the same way that none of y'all remember or care who Wanda's brother was. We hear a lot about the difference between showing and telling, and I think it's worth bringing up here. Both showing and telling are important to any story and serve key functions. Telling, for example, is a great way to communicate essential exposition, the basic information you need for the story to get underway. Showing, on the other hand, is a great way to make the story immediate and immersive, both in terms of characters' internal emotional lives and any action they experience. By seeing, in scenes, characters making choices and experiencing conflict, we are more engaged in the story and understand the characters more deeply than if we are simply told things about them that they do or feel. In movies this gets a little tricky since technically everything is shown to us since it's a visual medium, but I would say that the MCU, especially as it moves through its second and third phases, ditches showing as much as possible in favor of simply telling. We are told characters like certain things or have certain desires, but since we never see them act on any of that, since their actions are always consumed by stopping the bad guy by punching him, whatever knowledge we have about them amounts to essentially trivia. For example, we know Drax wishes to avenge his wife and daughter, who were killed by Ronan.
Revenge!
In Guardians 1, he takes actions toward that goal and eventually helps defeat Ronan. But after Ronan's defeat, which was primarily not caused by Drax, it should be noted, Drax develops no new desires or interests, meaning that we have nothing else to identify with in his character. There is a moment when he feels a feeling about his wife and daughter, but it is fleeting and surrounded by jokes. Therefore it doesn't count. So when he dies in this movie, there's not that much for us to actually miss, other than jokes and whatever headcanon we've made up about him to fill in the characterization vacuum left by his lazy writers, meaning that the emotional impact his death has is fairly trivial. Since the same is true for basically all the other characters, it means that the whole sequence has no real impact. This is what I mean when I say this movie pays the price for a decade of lazy characterization. Since so much of MCU has been told to us rather than shown us, the sequence of the mass offing of our heroes is unsubstantial. At what should be the most emotionally fraught moment of the entire series, the movie has little more to appeal to than your nostalgia in order to make any sort of impact, and the fact that we can't tell the difference between a good story and cheap sentimentality should make us all feel really gross. Speaking of things to feel really gross about,
And now the final ordeal, the paddling of the swollen ass with paddles.
Alright kids, we're in the home stretch now, and all we have to do is still talk about the worst stuff in the movie. Holocaust equivocation and casual perpetual misogyny. I remember thinking when I was talking about how Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was the worst for how it condones and excuses domestic abuse as part of its theme, that at least we're out of the really hairy stuff now and I can just talk about the regular old mediocrity of the storytelling for the rest of the series. But when I rewatched Infinity War, I realized that was a big fat lie that I told myself. Here's where I give some disclaimers. I do not mean to insinuate that the writers, directors, or producers of this movie are Holocaust deniers or equivocators. I do not here claim that they intentionally included material promoting those views. What I am claiming is that they were all too inept, thoughtless, or lazy to notice or do anything about what they were putting into their piece of mass market media. Anyway, let's define some terms first. Holocaust denial is when a person, acting in bad faith or in sincere delusion, claims that the Holocaust didn't actually happen. They say Nazi Germany's state-sponsored genocide of more than 6 million Jews and other minority groups during World War II is a fiction, concocted by Jews or the West or the libs or whoever for hazy, nonsensical, nefarious reasons. White supremacist and human lice colony Nick Fuentes is one of these. Don't look him up. Holocaust questioning is when a person, usually acting in bad faith, raises questions about the scope or scale of the Holocaust. They are careful not to deny it outright, but they feel more research needs to be done before they can make up their minds about one of the most documented events of modern history. Iranian dictator Ali Khamenei is one of these. Finally, Holocaust equivocating is when a person, usually acting in bad faith under the guise of free thinking, doesn't doubt the veracity or scope of the Holocaust, but simply tries to argue that Hitler's motives for enacting it were anything other than genocidal anti-Semitism and xenophobia. This is what we'll be focusing on here. While it may sometimes seem benign, Holocaust equivocating has a clear rhetorical goal: to displace or erase moral blame for the Holocaust. If Hitler is a raging anti-Semite xenophobe and kills millions of Jews, Romani, homosexuals, and other people, he is morally responsible for that evil act. If the Holocaust occurred for any other reason, it's possible to exonerate him.
I don't agree with his Bart-killing policy, but I do approve of his Selma killing policy.
One of the most prominent Holocaust equivocators today is former intellectual and current fake talk show host Jordan Peterson. He has used his training as a psychologist to armchair diagnose Hitler with a severe and specialized type of OCD, which compelled him to make everything around him clean and orderly, especially the dirty elements of society. Peterson claims that it is this impulse, not raging hate, which compels him to clean up Germany by forcing Jews and other undesirables into camps for orderly extermination. Hitler must have known that the resources he was putting toward this undertaking were crippling his war effort, so Peterson claims the only reasonable explanation for his self-defeating maniacal pursuit of it was his OCD running rampant, a non-hateful mania impairing his decision-making faculties.
Yeah, that's his problem. He's a nut. It's not about me being lazy. It's about him being a crazy nut.
And besides, it was mostly his cronies and even regular people who were, taking things too far anyway. This argument begs the question, why on earth would anyone want to paint Hitler as in any way not responsible for the Holocaust? Don't we pretty much agree that it was one of the most horrible events in world history, and that, as its architect, he is one of history's foulest monsters? Is it not all symbolic of the pinnacle of human evil? Well, yes. But what if you think it maybe wasn't? What if you kind of think Hitler had some points? What if you kind of maybe agree with him sometimes? If you're in that camp, but are smart enough to know that if you say outright that the Holocaust was correct or that it didn't happen, you would lose much of your audience and probably your job, then you can turn to equivocating. If by claiming Hitler actually just had uncontrolled OCD, or it was actually only his underlings, or it was actually perpetuated by the non-German Jewish elite, or whatever horse manure conspiracy theory you want to come up with, then the act becomes less immoral, perhaps not immoral at all, or at least not attributable to Hitler, and therefore your admiration of the man or Nazi doctrine or your own hatred of Jews or gay people or whoever is no longer a sin. You can dog whistle to your other mouth-breathing neo-Nazi pals and work on getting new recruits, using your cool, dispassionate, free-thinking logic to disabuse them of their emotional, snowflakey views about the Fuhrer. So, yeah, equivocating about monsters is bad, and it is exactly what this movie wants us to do with Thanos. To be clear, neither I nor the movie are comparing the events of the movie with those of the Holocaust, nor the character of Thanos to a monster like Hitler. To do so would be to severely cheapen one of history's greatest affronts to humanity, and would be totally inappropriate. What I am saying is that by asking us to equivocate and even rationalize the actions of a cartoon villain, the movie is actively mainstreaming very dangerous forms of thought to an audience of children and uncritical adults, at a time when public intellectuals and free thinkers are using those forms of thought to perpetuate hateful ideologies. Some of them do it right out in the open. Let me explain. The character of Thanos is unequivocally a homicidal, genocidal maniac. He is called as much by more than one character, to their credit. But the movie wants us to somehow see him as a complicated, almost tragic anti-hero. For example, the movie is careful to show us that Thanos' actions are not rooted in hatred, like a real bad guy, but rather in some kind of sense of balance or justice. He doesn't want to do what he does, but he must for posterity. He is compelled by some external fate or force of will acting upon and through him. His is a lonely calling, but it must be done for the greater good. He claims to suffer as much or more than the other inhabitants of the universe, claiming that what he has done has cost him everything. Sad. That he believes these things about himself is one thing, and probably necessary if we are to believe the sincerity of his actions. But the movie does nothing to challenge or refute it, and indeed encourages us to believe him too. He's not like a villain because he is so dispassionate and unvengeful and complicated. He doesn't want to do it any more than you or I would want to. He has feelings. He cries. I wanna know what love is. But remember his goal? We're not talking about some Don Quixote mad quest or even like the overthrow of a government or something. By the end of the movie, Thanos has literally ended half of all life, however he defines it, in the universe. That's not an act you can lightly ask an audience to feel ambivalent about. But this movie does, several times, by giving us many different reasons for giving Thanos the benefit of the doubt, removing and displacing his moral responsibility for his actions so we can feel okay about thinking he's kinda cool or interesting and buying a cheap plastic gauntlet at Disneyland. This is textbook equivocation, and while admittedly the stakes of doing it in a Marvel movie about a purple cartoon thumb are vanishingly small, by modeling it in this unnuanced way, the movie makes equivocating other far more serious real-world figures and events a lot more accessible, and potentially makes audiences who hear the equivocating bile spewed by neo-fascist trolls posing as actual human beings less likely to question it. Which is not good. Often in a story it is advantageous to have a complicated villain, one who is morally ambivalent and with whom the audience can empathize to a certain extent. But if that villain's goal is to kill half the universe, making him empathetic raises some serious moral questions that this movie, since it is not a real movie, is incapable of either recognizing or addressing. It shows, once again, an astonishing lack of care on the part of the producers and the largest family entertainment company on the planet for the potential impacts they could have on the children they make this content for, who they sell it to in infinite variations, and who fuel their massive profit margins.
No, stop. Think of the children.
Good job, Kevy. There's still one more thing to cover. Marvel loves women. This film, more than most in MCU, has some top-shelf examples of how much Marvel loves and respects its female characters, giving them plenty of agency and autonomy, and not just using their suffering to further the male-centered plot or for cheap emotional manipulation for the audience. For example, rather than letting us see Nebula assemble her giant death ray and make her sworn attack on Thanos, who you'll remember has destroyed her life and abused her for decades, she just gets caught off screen and horribly tortured so that the plot can happen. There's no reason Thanos can't just already know Gamora found a map to the Orange Rock, unless you find it entertaining to show us the internal workings of Nebula's robot body in a scene that reestablishes the one thing we do know about Thanos, that is, that he is terribly cruel. Marvel loves women. Wanda, who was kidnapped as a child, painfully experimented on until she developed magic psychic powers and had her parents and brother violently killed in front of her, also gets to suffer the double blow of the death of her robot boyfriend Vision, and also the movie not caring about it, since MCU failed utterly to characterize the relationship in any meaningful way. Good thing she got her show, I guess. Several years later, Marvel loves women. And who could forget Gamora, who was horribly murdered by the plot for no reason at all? I want you to show me. By that I mean, I know the movie tells us it's because Thanos has to sacrifice that which he loves in order to get the Orange Rock. But as we've discussed several times, the series has done nothing to build out the relationship between Gamora and Thanos. Meaning, we don't really know how he actually feels about her, and we have no idea at all why he feels however type of way he feels. Why did he save her in the first place? Why did he favor her over Nebula? What does he value in her now, especially now that she's betrayed him several times? More importantly, we don't know why the movie believes him when he says he loves her. Remember, he is the person who murdered Gamora's family, kidnapped her, spent decades physically and mentally abusing her, and in the end has no second thoughts at all about killing her to further a plan he has no actual reason to execute.
That doesn't make any sense.
I get that he might think he loves her, and maybe that's all the stone needs in order to accept the sacrifice. But the movie also believes him, and wants us to believe him too. The scene plays not as like a barbaric manifestation of crazed ambition, or as a horrific mutation of love gone berserk in the mind of a madman. It plays like a tragedy, and not a tragedy for Gamora. The victim of the scene, and the intended object of our pity, is Thanos. I hate everything in this movie! Now, making us sympathize with him in this moment is not impossible to do, but it requires a full metric ton of characterization, not an ounce of which we have ever gotten. If, over the course of a few movies, we get scenes between Thanos and Gamora and are able to witness their relationship, how she changed from loyal lieutenant to traitor to would-be assassin, perhaps how he developed too, even though his actions have never not been terrible with a capital T, then maybe we can get behind feeling bad, or at least ambivalent for him in this moment. As it is, we don't have anything of substance between these two characters, so just plays as Gamora getting killed by the plot so the protagonist can keep doing what he wants to. And the cherry on top of it all is that, because we don't know that much about Gamora and have not spent any time at all pursuing her story or getting deeper into her character, her death really has no impact. We've basically got, oh no, she was the sexy one in leather pants. This is why she needed to be the protagonist of the Guardians movies and not Peter. If there is investment in her story and character, her loss can mean something and have practical and emotional impact in the story. If there is not, we're left with lazy misogynistic crap that just furthers the plot of her abuser and actually attempts to make his actions sympathetic. Marvel loves women.
Oh, you better believe that's a paddling.
You thought we were done, didn't you? But don't you see, here in this circle of hell there is no end, there is only suffering. Here are some final things we need to point out about Avengers Infinity War before we can go home. 1. How does Thanos know exactly where the magic rocks are, and also have no idea where the magic rocks are? Like, his minions know to go to Wakanda to get the yellow rock out of Vision, somehow, but Thanos has to ask Loki for the blue rock on the Asgardian ship. He gets fooled by Doctor Strange on Titan, but evidently has no trouble finding the red rock on Nowhere, where it's probably, out on display, and he has no idea where in the galaxy the orange rock is. Oh, wait, I got it. It's just whatever the script needs at that very moment is what happens. Duh. 2. So the red guy from Captain America 1 got sent by the blue rock to guard the orange rock on the Sith homeworld for some reason. Did all the guys he killed with the blue rock also get sent there, or just him? Is the stone, punishing him? If so, why does it not judge Thanos for clearly abusing the stones for his own psychotic ends, since it's what the red guy was doing already? If not, why does it send red guy to the Sith planet? Also, he feels weirdly loyal to this apparent punishment after being so set on world domination. What's keeping him there other than shameless and confusing fan service? 3. This movie sets a new record, I think, for constant inappropriate drama-killing jokes. Remember how Gamora literally asks her love Peter to kill her if it looks like Thanos is going to capture her, then it turns out Drax was there the whole time pretending to be invisible and eating Fritos? How funny was that? Can we not go 6 seconds without a crappy joke? Oh wait, no, that's why you guys watch these. They're just lighthearted and fun. Being serious is for Batman. 4. Sure lucky that Barton and Ant-Man were able to somehow cut house arrest deals after they violated an international peace accord and then broke out of prison. Unless Cap'n just broke out Sam and left them there alone. Dick move. 5. I love how these movies are now forced to make up pretend reasons their characters with godlike powers can't just use them because they're written terribly. Vision has a literal infinity stone in his head that can control minds, a power which would break the plot since he could just make Thanos, not do bad stuff. So instead the movie just makes up that Vision, a robot made of perpetually regenerating vibranium, can be mortally stabbed by a space knife. The same is true with Thanos. He basically has to forget he has the magic rocks most of the time, otherwise the movie would break. And since the scope of what the rocks can and can't do goes unexplained, we are left to wonder, once he gets the reality stone, why can Thanos not simply reshape reality so that the universe has half its population? Or, for that matter, accommodate the universe's current population in a balanced way? Or, why can't he use the purple rock to generate a power blast strong enough to kill his attackers on Titan when he first sees them instead of having a punching fight? Or any number of other things. Seriously, all the movie has to do is show how taxing it is, even for Thanos, to wield the magic rocks. Maybe it grows harder with each one he collects. He fears using them too much in case doing so incapacitates him before he completes his quest, so he's forced to fight with just his natural strength as much as possible. The story needs it to be plausible for our mortal, non-Titan, non-magic rock-wielding heroes to actually beat him, but the story's solution to this is basically him just going easy on him, which is stupid. 6. Finally, after 438 movies, we finally know what the magic rocks do, finally. Sort of. We learn in an exposition pill that each rock has a certain function, some of which are more clearly defined than others. For example, the Time Stone manipulates time, which seems pretty straightforward, and also we've seen it before.
I forgot to put in the crystals.
And the Mind Stone controls minds and stuff, which we've also seen. But the Power Stone and the Soul Stone do things?
Things.
Like a walk in the park.
And didn't the red rock used to be like liquid? How'd it turn into a rock? Whatever, doesn't matter. Basically, Thanos uses them to make people see things and pull moons on people and teleport and stuff. And with their powers combined, all 6 rocks can apparently cause anything to happen for some reason. So actually, we still don't really know what these things do or how they work or how they are used individually or together, other than like by thought power.
Why have we not heard of these rocks before?
7. In Avengers 2, we see Thanos grabbing his gauntlet out of like his space vault or something, like he was gonna go start using it. And then in Thor 3, we see a fake version of it on Odin's vault on Asgard for a fan service joke. In this movie, we learned that Thanos had the gauntlet made pretty recently. So, why are there fakes of this glove which didn't exist until recently, except for Thanos had it already 4 years ago? Guys, your writing is falling apart.
It's a piece of crap, it doesn't work.
8. Speaking of 4 years, what has Thanos been doing for the last 4 years? He grabs his gauntlet like he's gonna go out collect some rocks, and then nothing happens for 4 years. Like, was he just massing an army or something? Or learning where the rocks were? Killing people like normal? Anything? 9. This movie has more nanotech armor, which we saw in Black Panther, and which Tony has apparently also developed at some point. It's the culmination of the magic armor that comes out of nowhere trope you know I love. In Black Panther, I almost buy it because Wakanda is a magical science fiction kingdom, and T'Challa's suit just covers his body and doesn't like make things or do tricks. But Tony's suit does all kinds of weird things, including forming itself into shields and swords and guns and stompy feet. It also houses vast quantities of non-nanotech ammunition somewhere.
Unlikely.
And is controlled by Tony to create all of these shapes and forms somehow. Meanwhile, Peter's nanotech suit contains a full parachute somewhere. Like, just pretend to give an explanation, guys. 10. The whole thing of Doctor Strange looking in the back of the book for answers about how they're going to defeat Thanos feels stupid. All the more so when he looks at 14 million permutations and finds exactly one where they're successful. Especially hard to believe given that the reason they fail in this timeline is basically Peter Quill's immaturity and Steve Rogers' stubbornness. And also, it doesn't do anything anyway. He doesn't come out of it with a plan that he communicates or some key insight that they're missing, especially knowing what happens in Endgame. It's just silly. Like, bad first draft material somehow turned into a dramatic plot point. Come on, guys. 11. Steve, Natasha, and Sam have an old Avengers jet, which they presumably use for clandestine missions and stuff. Where does the fuel come from? Like, do they make jet fuel money? Or just constantly steal jet fuel or money? Or is this the first time in 2 years they've used the jet and they just walked everywhere else? Maybe they can travel by map. 12. I gotta say, so much of this movie's visual effects look totally fine, but by the end I feel like they were all tired and giving up because Tom Holland's floating head on his cartoon Spider-Man body is the silliest thing in the world, especially since he's being all dramatic because he doesn't want to die and stuff. Also, tiny Mark Ruffalo in a cartoon Iron Man Hulk suit. Like, did the intern do these shots because everyone else's contract hours were up? 13. Too bad Thor's clothing is as fireproof as he is when he's reigniting the star. Otherwise, we could have had an angry, very nude Thor running around in the climax. Can't win them all, I guess. I think that's it. Thanks for sticking around if you stuck around, as we've spent an unnecessary amount of time talking about a seriously terrible movie that doesn't actually merit discussion. Part of its awfulness isn't really its fault, since it inherits a boatload of problems it had no hand in making, but its badness is, to a large extent, all its own. We can't fault it for having to deal with a bunch of flat identical characters who have never really been characterized, but the fact that they all make terrible choices that make no sense, and the fact that the movie treats its female characters like abusable props, and the fact that it expresses some deeply problematic views about its villain, and the fact that it is a lazy, manipulative mess. All of that is all on this movie alone. Never has so little work gone into making such a complicated, sprawling, genre-defying movie. Except, of course, the sequel. Anyway, that'll do it for this time, folks. Sure been a blast, and sad as it seems, even the least fun thing you've ever done has to end sometime. But don't worry, I'll be back for my much-anticipated look at Ant-Man and the Wasp. A movie that, as far as I can remember, is a movie? Seriously, I remember absolutely nothing about this film. Maybe it'll even be good. Good night.
We have the magic rocks. They will keep us safe.
Don't ask me. I'm just a girl.